Welcome back. In the second screencast for Chapter 7, we'll cover anaerobic respiration. Remember, anaerobic respiration does not require oxygen gas. We'll look at primarily two different pathways, lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. If we start with glucose as our energy source, the first set of reactions for lactic acid fermentation is glycolysis. This is exactly the same glycolysis that we saw at the beginning of aerobic respiration. As we saw before, glucose is broken down into pyruvate. The usable energy is captured in ATP and NADH. The net gain in ATP is 2 molecules per glucose. Instead of the preparatory reaction, like we saw in aerobic respiration, during lactic acid fermentation, the pyruvate is converted to lactic acid. This is reduction, and it requires electrons and energy, which come from the NADH that was just produced during glycolysis. So why does the organism do this? Lactic acid is toxic. It causes the burning sensation you may have felt in your muscles. Why not just stop at pyruvate? The answer is pyruvate must be converted to lactic acid in order to regenerate NAD. NAD and NADH is in limited supply in the cells. It has to be constantly converted back and forth. Without NAD, glycolysis could not continue. I didn't emphasize this during our discussion of the electron transport chain of aerobic respiration, but in addition to generating ATP, the electron transport chain is vital in generating NAD, which is needed in glycolysis, the preparatory reaction, and the citric acid cycle. Here in lactic acid fermentation, the net gain in ATP produced during lactic acid fermentation is 2 ATPs per molecule of glucose. Your body can do both lactic acid fermentation and aerobic respiration. Why do you switch to lactic acid fermentation? It's because your body has run out of oxygen gas. Without oxygen, the electron transport chain shuts down. Without the electron transport chain operating and regenerating the NAD, the citric acid cycle, the preparatory reaction, and glycolysis would stop. By converting pyruvate to lactic acid, NAD is regenerated and glycolysis can continue. You cannot continue doing lactic acid fermentation for long periods of time because it just doesn't produce enough ATP to support your body's energy needs. Coaches encourage their athletes to cool down slowly after exercising vigorously in order to quickly flush away any accumulated lactic acid. This helps to reduce soreness and cramping. Alcoholic fermentation is another anaerobic pathway. Yeast uses this type of cellular respiration. If glucose is being used, the first step in the series of reactions is glycolysis once again. During alcoholic fermentation, the pyruvate is converted into ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. Here's glycolysis, the same series of reactions you've seen before. Glucose is oxidized, releasing energy and electrons. NAD is reduced, accepting the electrons and some of the energy as it's converted to NADH. The net gain in ATPs is just 2. 2 molecules of pyruvate are also produced. The next step in alcoholic fermentation is the conversion of pyruvate to ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. No additional ATP is produced, and the NADH produced during glycolysis is used. The alcohol and carbon dioxide are waste products. Why doesn't the yeast just stop at pyruvate? Like we saw in lactic acid fermentation, yeast must convert the pyruvate to ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide because this is how it regenerates NAD. Since there's only a limited amount of NAD in the cell, without converting pyruvate to alcohol and carbon dioxide, the cell would quickly run out of NAD and would not be able to continue glycolysis. We always started with glucose during our discussion of cellular respiration because it's a simple molecule to use. Many other molecules can be also used for energy, but their use involves additional biochemistry. Also keep in mind that the intermediate molecules that are produced at any point along the way can be removed for other uses. If there's an excess of any of these intermediates, they can also be plugged in and used for energy. All living things must do some type of cellular respiration. It's absolutely essential because it enables cells to get energy from food.